Jonathan Walker was the epitome of success at a young age. As the only heir to Walker Industries, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, he had the world at his feet. Tall, with striking features and a commanding presence, Jonathan was not only known for his business acumen but also for his charm. Despite his wealth and power, there was a quiet loneliness that haunted him. He had always been surrounded by people who wanted something from him, whether it was his wealth, his influence, or his connections. But deep down, he longed for someone who could see beyond all of that. One fateful evening, Jonathan attended a charity gala hosted by one of his company's partners. The event was glamorous, filled with the who's who of the business world. Jonathan was used to these events: endless small talk, shallow compliments, and the constant pressure to network. But that night, something was different. As he scanned the room, his eyes fell on a woman standing alone near the art exhibit. She was a breath of fresh air amidst the sea of superficiality. Emily was beautiful, but not in the way that turned heads immediately. Her beauty was subtle, the kind that grew on you the more you looked at her. She had an air of quiet confidence, her brown eyes sparkling with intelligence and kindness. Her hair, a cascade of soft curls, framed her face perfectly. She wore a simple, elegant dress that hinted at her natural grace. What captivated Jonathan the most was the genuine smile on her face as she admired the paintings. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda. Intrigued, Jonathan made his way over to her, introducing himself with his usual charm. Emily, unaware of who he was, treated him like any other guest at the gala. They struck up a conversation, talking about everything from the art on display to their shared love of books. For the first time in a long while, Jonathan felt like he could be himself, without the burden of his last name. As the night wore on, they found themselves lost in each other's company, oblivious to the people around them. By the end of the evening, Jonathan knew he had found someone special, someone who saw him for who he was, not what he had. Jonathan and Emily's relationship blossomed quickly. They spent every possible moment together, exploring the city, sharing meals, and talking late into the night. Emily introduced Jonathan to her world of creativity and imagination, while Jonathan showed Emily the workings of his high-stakes business life. Despite their different worlds, they complemented each other perfectly. Jonathan found peace in Emily's presence, and Emily was inspired by Jonathan's drive and ambition. After a year of dating, Jonathan knew he couldn't live without Emily. He planned an elaborate proposal, taking her on a surprise trip to Paris. On a beautiful evening by the Seine River, with the Eiffel Tower sparkling in the background, Jonathan got down on one knee and asked Emily to be his wife. Emily, tears of joy in her eyes, said yes without hesitation. Their love story seemed like something out of a fairy tale. Their wedding was a grand affair, attended by family, friends, and many of the elite from the business world. Emily, dressed in a stunning lace gown, looked like a princess. Jonathan, in his tailored suit, couldn't take his eyes off her. The ceremony was held in a magnificent cathedral, with every detail meticulously planned. As they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. They promised to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives, and in that moment, it seemed like nothing could ever come between them. After the wedding, Jonathan and Emily settled into their new life as husband and wife. They moved into a luxurious penthouse in the heart of the city, with stunning views and every modern convenience imaginable. For a while, life was perfect. Jonathan's business was thriving, and Emily was working on her first children's book, inspired by their love story. They spent weekends at their country estate, enjoying long walks and quiet evenings by the fire. But as the demands of Jonathan's job grew, the cracks in their relationship began to show. Walker Industries was expanding rapidly, and Jonathan found himself spending more and more time at the office. Meetings, conferences, and business trips became the norm, leaving little time for Emily. At first, Emily was understanding. She knew how much the company meant to Jonathan and supported him as best she could. But as the months went by, she began to feel increasingly lonely and neglected. Jonathan, consumed by the pressures of running a global empire, started to lose sight of what truly mattered. He became irritable and distant, often coming home late or not at all. When he was home, he was distracted, his mind always on work. Emily tried to talk to him about how she was feeling, but Jonathan brushed off her concerns, insisting that it was just a busy period and things would get better soon. But they didn't. The distance between them grew. In the once loving and supportive relationship, they had started to feel strained and disconnected. The breaking point came one night after an argument that was more heated than any they had had before. Jonathan had just returned from a week-long business trip, exhausted and stressed. Emily, desperate for his attention, had planned a romantic dinner, hoping to reconnect. But when Jonathan walked through the door, all he could think about was the deal that had fallen through that day. He barely acknowledged Emily's efforts, and when she tried to talk to him about it, he snapped. In the heat of the moment, hurtful words were exchanged. Emily accused Jonathan of neglecting their marriage, and Jonathan, feeling attacked, retorted that she didn't understand the pressure he was under. The argument escalated quickly, with both of them saying things they would later regret. Finally, in a fit of anger and frustration, Jonathan grabbed his coat and stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind him. Emily was left standing alone in the middle of their beautifully decorated living room, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know if Jonathan would come back, and for the first time, she wondered if their marriage could survive the strain. Jonathan, meanwhile, wandered the city streets, trying to clear his head. He felt trapped between his love for Emily and his obligations to the company. In that moment, it seemed easier to walk away from it all. He checked into a hotel and spent the night drinking, trying to numb the pain and confusion. Days turned into weeks, and Jonathan didn't return. He buried himself in his work, using it as an escape from the guilt and pain of his failing marriage. Emily, devastated by his absence, tried to go on with her life. She threw herself into her work, creating beautiful illustrations for her children's books, but her heart wasn't in it. She missed Jonathan terribly, but she knew she couldn't force him to come back. Then, one morning, Emily woke up feeling different. She had been feeling unwell for a few weeks, and now she had an idea why. She went to the doctor and confirmed what she had suspected. She was pregnant. The news filled her with a mix of emotions: joy, fear, and sadness. She was thrilled at the thought of having a child, but the realization that Jonathan might never return to share this experience with her broke her heart. Determined to be strong for her baby, Emily decided to leave the city and start fresh. She moved to a small town, far from the memories of her life with Jonathan. She found a quaint cottage with a beautiful garden and began preparing for the arrival of her baby. Despite the challenges, Emily found solace in her work and the support of her new community. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl she named Lily. With her father's striking blue eyes and her mother's gentle nature, Lily was a constant reminder of the love Emily once shared with Jonathan. Emily raised Lily with all the love she had, teaching her the values of kindness, honesty, and strength. The 4 years had passed since Jonathan walked out of Emily's life. In those years, Jonathan had thrown himself into his work, expanding Walker Industries to new heights. His success was unparalleled, but it came at a personal cost. The pain of leaving Emily still lingered in the back of his mind, but he buried it under layers of business deals and corporate achievements. He traveled frequently, attending international conferences and meetings, trying to fill the void in his life with work. It was during one of these trips that Jonathan met Victoria, a strikingly beautiful woman who worked as a PR executive for one of his company's partners. Victoria was everything Jonathan thought he wanted: gorgeous, sophisticated, and confident. She was well-versed in the world of high society, and unlike Emily, she understood the demands of his business life. Victoria and Jonathan started spending more time together, their relationship initially rooted in mutual convenience and the need for companionship. Victoria, who was ambitious and calculating, saw Jonathan as the perfect partner to advance her own career and status. She knew he was still emotionally scarred from his previous marriage, and she used that to her advantage. She was careful not to push too hard, allowing Jonathan to dictate the pace of their relationship. Over time, their relationship grew more serious, and Jonathan found himself relying on Victoria more and more. She was always there to support him during stressful times, offering a listening ear and understanding his world in a way Emily never could. However, despite the outward appearance of a perfect relationship, there was something missing. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that his life was incomplete. Victoria, with all her beauty and sophistication, couldn't fill the void that Emily had left. He convinced himself that this was just how life was supposed to be, that the passion and connection he once had with Emily was a youthful fantasy. Yet, a part of him remained restless, haunted by memories of the love he had walked away from. One afternoon, during a routine business meeting, Jonathan's phone buzzed with a notification. It was from an old friend who had recently moved to a small town a few hours away from the city. The message was simple: "You should come visit sometime. I think you'd be interested in what you might find here." Jonathan, curious and in need of a break from the monotony of his life, decided to take up the offer. He mentioned the trip to Victoria, who, preoccupied with her own work, encouraged him to go. A few days later, Jonathan found himself driving through the picturesque countryside, the rolling hills and quaint towns providing a stark contrast to his usual urban environment. As he neared the town, a sense of familiarity washed over him, though he couldn't quite place it. He checked into a small inn and spent the evening catching up with his friend, who kept dropping hints that there was something, or someone, Jonathan needed to see. The next morning, Jonathan decided to take a walk around the town. As he wandered through the charming streets, he found himself in front of a small bookstore. Drawn to the inviting display of children's books in the window, he decided to step inside. As he browsed through the shelves, a little girl, no more than 4 or 5 years old, caught his eye. She was seated at a small table, engrossed in a picture book, her blonde hair cascading in soft curls around her face. There was something strikingly familiar about her, something that tugged at Jonathan's heart. Suddenly, the door behind him opened, and a woman's voice called out, "Lily, sweetie, it's time to go." Jonathan turned around, and his breath caught in his throat. Standing in the doorway was Emily. She looked different, more mature, with a quiet strength about her, but there was no mistaking it. She was as beautiful as ever, and seeing her after all these years brought a rush of emotions that Jonathan had long suppressed. Emily's eyes widened in shock as she saw Jonathan standing there, and for a moment, neither of them could speak. The silence was broken by the little girl, who looked up at Emily and said, "Mommy, can we buy this book?" Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. Mommy? Could this be? The world seemed to blur around Jonathan as the realization dawned on him. Lily, the little girl with the big blue eyes, was his daughter. The resemblance was undeniable. She had his eyes, his features, and even the same curious expression he had as a child. Jonathan felt a surge of emotions: shock, joy, guilt, and an overwhelming need to know the truth. "Emily," Jonathan finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily, still in shock, could only nod, confirming what Jonathan had just pieced together. "Is she?" Jonathan's question hung in the air, and Emily's expression softened. "Yes, Jonathan. She's your daughter," Emily replied, her voice calm but filled with emotion. Jonathan's heart swelled with a mix of love and regret. He had missed so much: her birth, her first steps, her first words. The thought of it all was almost too much to bear. Jonathan felt an overwhelming urge to reach out to Lily, to hold her, to make up for lost time. But as he took a step forward, he hesitated, unsure of how to approach the situation. Emily, sensing his turmoil, gently placed a hand on his arm. "Let's go somewhere we can talk," she suggested, glancing at Lily, who was still engrossed in her book. They left the bookstore and walked to a nearby park, where Lily could play while they talked. Sitting on a bench, Jonathan and Emily finally had the conversation that had been 4 years in the making. Emily explained how she had discovered she was pregnant shortly after Jonathan left, and how she had decided to leave the city to start fresh. She had wanted to give Lily a happy, stable life, away from the pressures of Jonathan's world. Jonathan listened intently, his heart aching with every word. He couldn't believe how much he had missed, how much he had lost by walking away. Emily had been through so much on her own, raising their daughter without him. He felt a deep sense of guilt and remorse, knowing that his actions had not only hurt Emily but had also deprived him of the chance to be a father to Lily. When Emily finished, there was a long silence between them. Finally, Jonathan spoke, his voice filled with emotion. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known, I never would have left." Emily nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know, Jonathan, but what's done is done. We can't change the past. All we can do is figure out where we go from here." Jonathan spent the next few days in the small town, trying to make up for lost time with Lily. They went to the park, visited the local zoo, and even had ice cream at the town's quaint little parlor. Emily watched from a distance, her heart full of mixed emotions. It was clear that Jonathan was making an effort to be a part of Lily's life, and Lily, in turn, seemed to be warming up to him. She was a bright, happy child, and it was easy to see that she was thrilled to have her father around. However, as much as Emily wanted to believe that things could be different now, she couldn't shake the fear that Jonathan would leave again. She had built a life for herself and Lily, one that didn't depend on Jonathan or his wealth. She had learned to be strong, to rely on herself, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to let Jonathan back in, especially with the baggage he now carried. Jonathan, on the other hand, was determined to make things right. He knew he had made mistakes, but he was willing to do whatever it took to be a father to Lily and to rebuild his relationship with Emily. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, he felt like he had something worth fighting for. He started spending more time in the town, even considering the possibility of relocating some of his business operations there to be closer to Emily and Lily. Meanwhile, back in the city, Victoria was beginning to notice Jonathan's absence. She had always prided herself on being able to keep Jonathan's attention, but lately, he seemed distant, distracted. When she learned that Jonathan had been spending time in a small town, she grew suspicious. Determined to find out what was going on, Victoria decided to pay an unannounced visit to the town, hoping to catch Jonathan off guard. Victoria arrived in the small town one afternoon, unannounced, just as Jonathan was walking with Emily and Lily through the park. The sight of them together, Jonathan laughing with Lily, Emily smiling beside him, was like a knife to Victoria's heart. She had always known that Jonathan had a past, but seeing it so vividly in front of her was something she hadn't been prepared for. Without hesitation, Victoria marched up to them, her eyes blazing with anger. "Jonathan, what the hell is going on here?" she demanded, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of a few passers-by. Jonathan, caught off guard, turned to face her, his expression a mix of surprise and guilt. "Victoria, I can explain," Jonathan stammered, but Victoria wasn't having it. She turned her gaze to Emily, who was holding Lily's hand protectively. "And who is she?" Victoria asked, her tone icy. Emily, sensing the tension, stepped forward. "I'm Emily, Jonathan's ex-wife," she said calmly, though her heart was pounding. "And this," she added, glancing down at Lily, "is our daughter." The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Victoria's face drained of color as she processed what Emily had just said. For a moment, she was speechless, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Jonathan, who had been struggling to find the right words, now stood between the two women, his face a mask of conflict and regret. "Jonathan," Victoria finally managed to say, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. "How could you keep something like this from me? How could you let me believe that we had a future together when all this time?" Jonathan took a deep breath, his eyes filled with guilt. "Victoria, I didn't know about Lily until recently. I made a terrible mistake leaving Emily, and I didn't realize how much I had lost until I saw them again. I'm sorry for not being honest with you, but I need to do the right thing now. I need to be a father to my daughter." Victoria's eyes flashed with anger and hurt. "And what about me? What am I supposed to do? Just step aside while you play happy family?" Emily, who had been silent up until this point, spoke up. "Victoria, I understand that this is hard for you, but you deserve someone who can give you their whole heart, someone who isn't haunted by the past. Jonathan and I have a complicated history, but Lily is our priority now. Please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Victoria's expression softened slightly as she looked at Emily, then back at Jonathan. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the regret, and the pain. She realized that Jonathan had never truly moved on from Emily, and that she had been trying to fill a void that was never hers to fill. With a deep sigh, she nodded, though the pain was still evident in her eyes. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Jonathan," Victoria said quietly, "but I can't be part of this." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Jonathan and Emily standing in the park with Lily. As Victoria disappeared from view, Jonathan turned to Emily, his heart heavy. "I'm so sorry for everything, Emily. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to be part of Lily's life, and I want to try to make things right between us. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Emily looked at Jonathan, her emotions swirling. She had loved him deeply once, and despite everything, a part of her still did. But she had also learned to live without him, to be strong and independent. She wasn't sure if they could ever go back to the way things were, but she knew they needed to find a way to move forward for Lily's sake. "I don't know if we can ever be what we were, Jonathan," Emily said softly, "but I'm willing to try, for Lily. She deserves to have her father in her life. But we need to take things slow, and you need to prove that you're here for the long haul, not just until things get tough again." Jonathan nodded, understanding the gravity of what she was saying. "I will, Emily. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes to make this work, to be the father Lily needs and the partner you deserve." Over the next few months, Jonathan worked tirelessly to rebuild his relationship with Emily and to be a present, loving father to Lily. He spent more time in the small town, getting to know the community, helping out at Lily's school events, and even taking on a less demanding role in his company so he could focus on his family. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt and tension, but slowly, trust began to grow between Jonathan and Emily once more. Emily, too, found herself softening towards Jonathan. She saw the genuine effort he was making and the love he had for their daughter. While she was still cautious, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something new together. Not a continuation of their old life, but a fresh start. As the seasons changed, so did their relationship. Jonathan proposed to Emily again, this time in a simple, heartfelt way that reflected the new life they were building together. Emily accepted, knowing that while their journey had been difficult, it had led them to a place of understanding, forgiveness, and love. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair, attended by only their closest friends and family. Lily was the flower girl, her face beaming with happiness as she watched her parents exchange vows. There were no grand gestures, no elaborate ceremonies, just two people who had found their way back to each other, ready to face the future together as a family. As they stood together, hand in hand, watching Lily chase after butterflies in the garden, Jonathan and Emily knew that they had finally found what they had both been searching for all along. A second chance at happiness, rooted in love, trust, and the family they had created together. Hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Your participation is essential so that we can continue to bring you more incredible stories. Share it with your friends to help our channel grow. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.